everyone. This is Lori Barnes, your astrology coach, back with another episode on the new moon in Aries. So this month we have a new moon in Aries, which is the second one. If you remember, we had a new moon in Aries a month ago, and it was at 0 degrees, and this one is at 29 degrees. So every once in a while, we catch a new moon in the same sign twice in a row. That only happens when the first one is at the very beginning of the sign, and the second one is at the very end, like what we have this time. So I'm going to give you the dates and time. The new moon is Wednesday or Thursday, April 19th or 20th, depending on where you live. If you're on the west coast of the United States, it's at 9:13 p.m. on Wednesday. If you're on the east coast of the United States, it'll be 12:13 a.m. in the morning on Thursday, overnight Wednesday night. And if you're here in Rome, Italy, where I am, it's at 6:13 a.m. in the morning. Now, this is also a solar eclipse. That makes this new moon even more potent, because when we have eclipses, it makes that moon more potent. I've heard it said from many different astrologers, it's like 3 times more potent. So I don't know that that's statistically accurate. I don't know that anyone's actually done research on that, but it's fair to say that an eclipse makes the new moon more potent. And we always have eclipses in pairs. So there will be this first one, which is a solar eclipse, and then the next one will be at the full moon, and that'll be a lunar eclipse. And so a solar eclipse always happens with the new moon, and a lunar eclipse always happens with a full moon. And what that means is that the moon passes between the sun and Earth. That is what happens. That's what's making the eclipse. Many people want to know, am I going to be able to see it? And not everyone is able to see an eclipse. And that's pretty standard. The eclipse path is not going to be visible for everyone. If you want to know if you'll be able to see the eclipse, I'm going to let you know where you can see it. The path of the eclipse is going to be visible in South and East Asia, Australia, Antarctica, and if you happen to be in the Pacific or Indian Ocean. So you'd have to be in a boat to see it. So most of us won't be able to see this particular eclipse, but you can watch it online. It is broadcast on a few different channels. I use dateandtime.com. It's easy to find. So if you want to watch it, you could probably catch it online. Now, not everyone feels the potent energy of an eclipse. So it's really important to keep that in mind. So if you're thinking, oh, well, how is this going to affect me? Or does this affect everyone the same? Well, it doesn't. When an eclipse is active in your chart, it's touching something in your chart. And it has to be a pretty tight orb, which means the degree that touches something in your chart. So if you have something around 29 degrees Aries, or any of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, really late in the sign, then that is going to activate whatever part of the chart that is for you. Or if you have something early, like really early in the fixed signs, 0 degrees, Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, or Scorpio. And Pluto happens to be sitting at 0 degrees Aquarius. It recently moved into this sign, and it makes this particular point, this degree, very active. It's like a hot wire, like if you touch it, it could be like, phew, like, electrocution, a lot of energy. I am wanting to share this information with you so you can look in your chart and see if your chart is activated by this eclipse, this potent eclipse. It is a total solar eclipse, although not very many people are going to get to see it because of the line of visibility, only if you're in South and East Asia, Australia, Antarctica, or in either the Pacific or Indian Ocean. That's the only place you're really going to be able to see the solar eclipse. Okay, so if it's not enough to have a solar eclipse, we have Mercury retrograde coming, and we have a square between Pluto, the moon, and the sun. So like you see, Aries and Aquarius usually are 2 signs that astrologers say get along really well, fire and air. And yes, that's true. But because the sun and the moon are at the very end of the degree, or at the very end of the sign, they're not going to stick around in Aries much longer. The sun's already been traveling through. It's at the end of its visit to Aries, and the moon is the fastest moving body. It only takes 2.5 days before it goes through a whole sign. So within hours after this new moon, both the sun and the moon will have moved into Taurus. Taurus is one of those fixed signs. They'll be at that 0 degree mark. They're moving directly into this tension. It's like a perpendicular square, 90-degree angle between these, the sun and the moon moving into Taurus and Pluto in Aquarius. They're 90 degrees apart. And that's why I'm calling this new moon, like the theme is like review, edit, and purify. So review and edit are definitely Mercury retrograde words, and we'll be moving into a Mercury retrograde the day after this new moon. And purify or purification is very much a Pluto word. So it's kind of like we've had this tremendous amount of energy from planets being in Aries. We have the sun and moon now having their second new moon in the sign of Aries. Jupiter has been traveling through Aries, and it's definitely energizing this new moon. It energized the last new moon as well. Even though it's not really close in terms of degrees, it's there and it's pretty active. So having Jupiter there is nice because it is bringing some optimism, maybe a little bit of luck to this particular new moon, just like the last one. Jupiter also is known for bringing maybe overindulgence or overdoing it. So, we want to look at both sides. We don't want to always say Jupiter's, lucky, because even though it is a planet for luck and opportunity, we can't just assume it's always going to bring positive things. We want to acknowledge that it can also mean a little bit of overdoing. And when we're talking about Aries, it's like burnout, like too much. You put so much energy into something that you feel like depleted and burned out. And then, we move into the retrograde, we move into the square with Pluto, we have this eclipse. So it's really an intense new moon that we're walking into. And I hope that I can help you prepare for that and also be aware that there's this significant shift in energy that's coming, that the sun and the moon are leaving Aries. We'll still have Jupiter there, but they're moving into Taurus. The Mercury has already moved into Taurus, and Mercury's retrograde cycle will completely be in Taurus. So we're moving from this fiery, I can do anything, kind of gung-ho, I love a challenge. Aries is the sign of the warrior, the conqueror, and hopefully you've had a really fruitful month since we kicked off the equinox and the astrological new year at the last new moon at, the early degrees of Aries. And we would think, oh, it's another new moon, it's new beginnings, new times, it's, ready to expand and grow. But really, this new moon is more about preparation for going into a time, a cycle where things are going to slow down. And we're going to have more of a call to be realistic, to have a foot on the ground, maybe both feet on the ground, depends on your whole chart. But there is this call for reality, like a reality check, and to really look into things and refine them and realign them, which Taurus can be very helpful to do. So it may not be so much an easy or pleasant, and what I mean by that is, it's probably not going to be this like relaxing, oh, I'm just going to kind of like, float through, but it could be almost like a wake-up call. Like, you've been doing all this, energy and go and exciting ideas and really creative, like the flow of creativity. Aries is a very creative sign. Is going to go from, the idea creation phase to Taurus, which is, okay, well, let's do it. Let's get it done. Let's be realistic. What is the budget? What are the numbers? Where are the materials? Where are we going to get them? How long is it going to take for them to get here? Let's plan for this. Let's get a routine together around this, and let's just go forward, but in a very practical manner. Now, with Mercury retrograde in the picture, there's going to be some details that are going to need to be reviewed, and you're going to have probably the most success by focusing on things you've already started, refining things you've already started, realigning things. You're going to really benefit from taking a look back and gaining insight into what you've done, especially looking back to the last Mercury retrograde period. Of course, you can go farther back. If you work with the Mercury retrograde cycles, though, you start to get into this groove where every 3 months, you take a pause and you look at what you've done, all the progress you've made, all the things that you have been working on, and you just check them. Did I miss something? Did I make sure that I made a really strong foundation to grow on? Have things shifted or changed that I need to address? And when you do that, it helps to sort out small things and not let them grow into big things. It lets you help errors or problems before they blow up. And it helps you to, take one more look and be like, oh, but I forgot I wanted to do this, or I have this other idea that fits really well. And if you don't review your work, then it's not opening that creative flow to make it even better. And that's what's really great to do under a Mercury retrograde. So this entire Mercury retrograde in Taurus is going to be refining and realigning things, and it's going to be related to the area of your chart that's Taurus. So if you have your chart, and I hope that you do, go and look to see, where is Taurus in my chart? What house does Taurus occupy, or houses, depending on the house system you use? And that's going to give you more information where to start looking for the things that you want to realign and review and refine. Taurus is a fixed sign. Pluto's in that fixed sign of Aquarius, and the sun and the moon are moving into Taurus. I imagine that this is going to help bring to the surface things that need mending, or things that need your attention. It should focus you on some tension points, some challenges in what you want to do, and bring them to light so that you can actually work on them. These are the positive, helpful things that Mercury retrograde does for us, because Mercury retrograde tends to have this bad, like, oh no, not Mercury retrograde, not again, no, I don't want that. It's more commercial now. You hear about it on radio stations or in lots of blogs and magazines. Like, it's pretty well known. So there's a lot of fear that comes during Mercury retrograde season, because there's all these terrible things that can happen, communication breakdown and misunderstandings and things like that. And while that may be true, I believe with anything in astrology that if we can't work with these different configurations to help us grow, then, why bother with astrology? Astrology is here to help us improve our outcomes. So there has to be something that the Mercury retrograde cycle is helping us with. And that is to create these stronger foundations, to find small things before they become big, to remind us that life really is about cycles. It's about the cyclical nature, right? It's the spiral staircase. So it's not like a circle that never grows. It's a spiral that's continuously growing and moving upward. And when we try to live linear, only focus on forward, it's only faster, forward, better, we are misguiding ourselves, because that's not the nature of life. And it opens up this opportunity to feel bad about what we're doing, because oh my gosh, I didn't do better than last time. I didn't grow further, better, higher. But that's not how life works. Just look around, go out and look at nature, because everything in nature has a cycle of putting in the seed sprouts, the seed grows, it blooms, and then it starts to gives away its flowers or its seeds, and then it starts to wither and eventually dies and goes back to the ground so it can do that cycle again. And our lives are like this. Our astrology charts are like this. The astrology is completely based on cycles. So we are going from one cycle of Aquarius, or Pluto going into Aquarius. It's a huge cycle, right? We're going into a Mercury retrograde cycle. Those happen more often. So we get to work with those far more often, 3 times a year. We may be more accustomed to working with a Mercury retrograde cycle than Pluto and Aquarius, because we don't get to experience Pluto and Aquarius very often. In fact, we won't get to experience it again in our lifetimes. It takes 248 years for Pluto to go all the way through the zodiac. So we're all experiencing Pluto and Aquarius together for the first time, right? It's an exciting time. With the sun and the moon moving from Aries into Taurus, it's going to show us how to work with Pluto, at least for those of us who it's activating that in our chart. Now, some of you won't have anything at 0 degrees, fixed signs, or late, 29 degrees late in the cardinal signs. Cardinal, remember, is Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, and the fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So of those 6 signs, we all have them in our charts. So we for sure have those signs in our charts, but we may not have a planet or a point occupying those degrees. So those of you who do are the ones who are really going to feel this activation the most. And you're likely going to experience some sort of tension point or challenge in the parts of your chart where they are. So where Taurus and Aquarius are in your chart is where you want to look at. As I say this, you may remember a couple of years ago, those exact same parts of our charts were really activated by Saturn and Uranus. So it can be that there's growth, there's a furthering of whatever that theme was from a few years ago. Of course, the energy is completely different. We're talking about, Pluto, and for a short amount of time, the sun, and even shorter amount of time, the moon, activating that part, but it might activate or reactivate some things that happened a few years ago. And that's even that message is magnified even further, considering that we are going into a Mercury retrograde completely in the sign of Taurus. So definitely check out your chart. Where is Taurus? Is it your third house? Is it going to be your communication, your learning, your close colleagues or siblings? That would be affected. If it's in your ninth house, it may be higher learning or foreign places or working with foreign people. And if it's in your seventh house, it's going to be about relationships and your relating style and any contracts or clients. If you're a solo, if you're a coach or a therapist or an astrologer, your clients are that part of the charts. Not if you're an employee. If you work for a company, that's a different thing. If it's your 10th house, it's going to relate to your career calling, which is what I focus on in my practice. I help people find their career calling. Like, what am I here to do? So look for Taurus in your chart and see what's activated. Look for the Aquarius part of your chart, because that's where Pluto is transiting through. And that's going to give you more information. The new moon is also the solar eclipse. Like all things in astrology, how potent it is for you is going to depend on if it's activating something in your chart. And it's those same points that I just covered. The solar eclipse happens with the new moon, and you will want to know if you have anything in those late cardinal signs or early fixed signs. Now, what's really interesting is that eclipses are based on the sun and the moon and the relationship to the lunar nodes. And it would take a whole video to explain the nodes. So, maybe someday I will do that. But right now I'm going to stick with the new moon. But I just want to mention that because the proximity of the nodes to the new moon or the full moon, depending on what kind of eclipse it is, it has to do with their relationship. And because the nodes are still in Scorpio and Taurus, they're not going to move into Libra and Aries until July of this year. But when they do, they're going to cross over this exact same point, this eclipse point at 29 degrees Aries. So just want to give you a heads up that this point is going to get reactivated in July, and to pay attention. If you have planets in these late cardinal and early fixed signs, then this is really important information for you to keep track of. Okay, I want to give you the dates for Mercury retrograde so you can write them on your calendar. The shadow for the Mercury retrograde started on April the 7th. So we've been in this pre-shadow period already for over a week now at this point. And it's going to go retrograde on the 21st, and then it will go direct on May 14th, and then it'll go into its post-shadow period, and that will go until June the 1st. So anything new that you want to start, if you can wait until that date, June the 1st, that would be ideal. And remember that the bookends, when Mercury goes retrograde and when it goes direct, are the most sensitive times, and that's when the more difficult parts of the Mercury retrograde tend to be more active. So when it's slowing down and getting ready to station retrograde, which means that it appears like Mercury has stopped and then starts going backwards. And then when it goes direct, when it appears like it's stopping and going forward. And really, it's just the appearance of the Mercury orbit from our perspective on Earth. It kind of looks like it's going backwards when it's really not. It's just orbiting around the sun, and it's a unique perspective from Earth. The planet Mercury at the time of the new moon is going to be with a fixed star called Minkar, Menkar. And I take Bernadette Brady's definition of that because she's done intense research on the fixed stars. And so I like to defer to her to get her description of what that energy looks like. And what it does is it clarifies and qualifies the energetic vibe. It doesn't take it usurp, it doesn't change anything that I've already said. It's just another layer on top. So Minkar symbolizes unconscious forces in the human collective. So it's speaking to the human collective. And Mercury is in Taurus. It's at 15 degrees Taurus, and it's very close to Uranus at 17 degrees Taurus when we have the new moon. And that is important because Mercury represents our communication style. And of course, Mercury transiting isn't our particular communication style, but it is talking about the weather, like the astrological vibe of the moment. And if Mercury is with a star that speaks to the collective, and with all this other intense energy happening at the same time, we kind of just want to be aware of that. And Mercury is also with Uranus. So there's this reformative type of thinking or communication that is in the air when we walk into the new moon. I wanted to mention Mars real quick, that Mars is the ruler of Aries. So Mars is the ruler of the new moon. That makes Mars important in the new moon chart. Mars is traveling through Cancer, and Cancer is a sign that is a bit difficult for Mars to express its pure energy, because Mars is like direct, take action, like go out and do things. And it can also represent, your inner will and your inner determination. And in Cancer, Mars expresses itself in a Cancerian way, which means it has kind of like this hard shell on the outside, right? So it's kind of like protective of itself and not as direct as Mars tends to be in one of its own signs, like Aries. It's like, yeah, like, like straightforward, right at you, very powerful energy. And in Cancer, it's more like the crab. It has to kind of go sideways, and it doesn't go about things as direct and forward. So the way that Mars is expressing is a way that's not its usual traditional way of acting. It has to do things in a non-traditional way. And so think about that when you're thinking about the new moon in Aries and what its ruler is, how it's supporting the new moon. It's a really important new moon. The eclipses make the moon phases extra important, but with the Mercury retrograde and the contact with Pluto, I think this is a really important new moon, because it's going to indicate like where some intense action is taking place in your chart. And now if you're looking at your chart and you're like, I don't have anything at the end of Aries or Cancer or Libra or Capricorn, and I don't have anything in my chart at the very, very beginning, 0, 1, 2 degrees of a fixed sign of Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, or Scorpio, then you're not going to feel all these energetics as much. You still may notice something in your Aquarius part of your chart or Taurus part of your chart, because planets are traveling through that part. But if there's no planets or points there, then you're not going to feel as much of this energetic activation that I've been talking about. But if you do, it is very important, and you want to consider all the different layers and synthesize them together. That is the art of astrology. That's why you may want to contact an astrology to help you interpret what's going on in your chart. I am currently accepting new clients. I'm happy to set up an appointment to do an astrological consultation, and I specialize in coaching. So really working with your chart and kind of going deep into all the different layers, the different things that it's saying, the long-term energetics coming up for you, and the short term, and answering, kind of like questions as to, what is the best time to do this and what is the best time to do that. So I will be back with another video for you in a couple of weeks. We'll have the full moon of this cycle coming up on May the 5th. The full moon's going to be in Scorpio at 14 degrees, and that will be the second eclipse of the pair. that'll be a lunar eclipse. So I'll be back to talk with you about that. And I'm going to leave you with a couple of quotes as it relates to this new moon. So the first one is reflective thinking turns experience into insight, which I believe that Mercury retrogrades are fantastic for helping us find insight into what it is that we're currently working on. The next one is from Peter Drucker, and he says, follow effective action with quiet reflection. From the quiet reflection will come even more effective action. And that's exactly, I think, what we've been talking about today with this new moon. And then the last one is from Louise Hay, one of my favorite authors. And she says, your soul needs time for solitude and self-reflection. In order to love, lead, heal, and create, you must nourish yourself first. And that is a great thing to do under this Mercury retrograde that we're walking into. I think that if you take the time to review, edit, and purify over the next month as we go through the Mercury retrograde cycle, we let the dust settle with the eclipse and see kind of what that brings. And we work with whatever activations you may have in your chart from the sun and moon squaring Pluto as soon as they change signs, sextile Saturn. All of this is going to help you get a better understanding of what's going on in life with the different themes and topics that you are working with right now. And your chart is going to help you navigate that and help you improve your outcomes. So I will see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.